Her birthday was coming to an end. She was seeing off her last friend with her husband, and only her husband and his two friends remained at the table. Her husband's name was Mike, and his friends were Steve and Peter. Mike was already very drunk, and his friends kept persistently pouring her vodka. The room was quiet, but in reality the party was just beginning. After some time, she closed the front door and returned to the living room. Without entering the room, she nodded to Peter. He stood up and came out to her. "How is he?" she asked. "Very drunk, but Steve is sitting with him," Peter answered. They went into a small room. Everything happened quickly. Hugs, hot kisses, impatient hands, panties pulled down. She had been waiting for this moment all evening. She lay on her back on the table, and there it was. Pleasure. Just a few steps away, her drunk husband sat behind the wall, and she, without hiding, was making love to his friend. The thought of it excited her even more. She thought of her husband, thought of her betrayal, and the first wave of pleasure washed over her. Treason. That was what turned her on the most. The touch of another man, the sharpness of sensation, the risk, the desire for something bold and unusual, enhanced by alcohol, completely blew her mind. Peter couldn't hold back for long. A few more powerful thrusts, and he came. "Don't get dressed. I'll go relieve Steve," he said, kissing her on the lips. She wouldn't have been able to get dressed anyway. She wanted more. She remained lying on the table, her skirt still pulled up. Soon Steve appeared in the doorway. She reached out to him with her hands. Now the party had truly begun. She was alone with two men in one apartment, with a drunk husband who was there but already too intoxicated. The first time she got really drunk, it all started with fun, dancing, laughter, jokes. And then these two began hitting on her. "But you can't do that. It's indecent." "I'm not like that," she tried to convince herself, but Steve had already dragged her into the room, and Peter was watching her drunk husband to make sure he didn't accidentally walk in. Steve's hands persistently slid over her body, and desire flared up inside her. "But I'm not like that," echoed in her head. Then Peter showed her a video. On the screen, her husband was making love to another woman. That was the final blow. She gave in. She decided to take revenge, but she hadn't expected it would be with two at once. However, there was no turning back. Blushing with shame, she began to undress. Since then, all holidays had become much more exciting. Each time, they came up with something new, something even bolder. She could no longer refuse, and she didn't want to. Tonight, Steve could hardly contain himself, waiting for her to be ready. When he had finished and left, she opened her eyes. Everything was as usual. She didn't expect anything different. This wasn't like a normal relationship. She took the towel she had prepared in advance and went to the bathroom. A few minutes later, she returned to the living room, where her husband and his friends continued drinking vodka, completely unaware of what had just happened in the next room. She sat down at the table between the guys. They poured her a shot. She drank it. The second one, too. Leaning back in her chair, she slightly lifted the hem of her skirt. This was also part of the game, displaying herself right at the table, next to Mike. Meanwhile, Peter continued to pour vodka for her husband. 15 minutes later, Mike could barely keep his eyes open. The second stage of the game had begun. Now she wasn't particularly shy. Taking Steve by the hand, she led him out into the hallway. He hugged her around the waist. "Right here?" He grinned. "Are you afraid?" She answered with a question. With one movement, her skirt fell to the floor. She bent over, exposing herself. He started slowly but gradually picked up the pace. The thrusts became stronger. During one particularly forceful push, she stumbled forward, and her head ended up peeking into the room. Peter, seeing this, almost choked on his juice and quickly turned his gaze to Mike. He barely registered anything, unable to focus, but still turned in her direction. His empty, unfocused stare excited her even more. Peter held Mike, who was about to fall face first into his salad, then looked at her face, sticking out of the doorway. This aroused her so much that when the men switched places, she bent over again to be in full view of everyone. When it all started, they thought it would be a one-time adventure, something they would try once or twice. but this petite, dark-haired, modest-looking girl revealed a side of herself that even they hadn't expected. They didn't show things like this in movies. Tomorrow they would all sober up. Peter wouldn't be able to look her in the eye. He would avoid her for a week. Mike, even longer. But then there would be another holiday. Steve saw that Mike was already falling asleep from the alcohol. He turned away and grinned. They didn't yet realize that she wouldn't be able to live without it anymore, that the third round would be even more intense. She went to the shower. She heard Mike wake up. The guys poured him another drink. "To the health of my wife!" Someone's voice rang out. He fell asleep again. This time he slept soundly, until morning, or maybe not. But now they had even more time. Steve and Peter devoured her body with their eyes. She turned slightly to give them a better view, then sat down on their laps, taking a sip with each of them. To complete the experience, she slid off their shirts. They had 2 more such meetings, but the third time they quarreled, and she went to her friend, reminiscing about her adventures. Please subscribe to the channel and like it. You can also leave your comments. These actions help promote the channel on the YouTube platform and inspire me to release new sweet stories for you, my dear viewers. You can also follow the links to my other videos or enter the channel.